the strange logic of love that says goodbye. We've all heard it before. I love you, but we can't be together. The words hit like a soft slap, gentle in tone, devastating in meaning. Our instinct tells us this must be a lie, a contradiction. After all, love, real love, conquers all, doesn't it? Stories have conditioned us. From fairy tales to modern films, we've inherited a vision of love that knows no borders, no limits. If you care deeply for someone, surely you'd cross oceans, burn bridges, sleep on concrete floors, or go broke just to hold their hand. You either love someone with all you have, or you never did. There's no grey zone, no compromise, no third possibility. At least that's what we've been led to believe. Romanticism's unbending ideals. Beneath this all-or-nothing view lies the shadow of romanticism, a beautiful but brutal ideology, one that paints love in primary colours, bold, pure, undiluted by logic. It whispers that emotions alone should drive our choices, and that logistics are merely cowardly excuses. D.H. Lawrence once wrote, "A man in love will sleep on a park bench for the woman he loves." And that sentence has echoed for generations. It fuels our sense that inconvenience is irrelevant, even noble, if love burns brightly enough. By that standard, love must prevail regardless of circumstance. Children from previous relationships, oceans of distance, empty bank accounts, cultural chasms, or the fragility of mental health. According to this doctrine, love is enough. It is supposed to be everything. A quieter philosophy emerges. But what if there's another kind of love? A quieter, less celebrated form. One that walks not into fire, but away from it, without making a sound. This alternate view does not deny feeling, but it doesn't idolize it either. It understands that love, no matter how sincere, does not exist in a vacuum. It must live among everyday realities, disapproving families, conflicting values, misaligned dreams, and cities that sit across time zones, like emotional planets, spinning too far apart. This kind of love sees park benches not as symbols of devotion, but as warnings. It knows that love that insists on martyrdom may not be noble, it may be self-serving. And sometimes, to protect the very person you cherish, you must be willing to release them from your orbit. Not all who leave are liars. We often assume the person who walks away is dishonest, weak, or emotionally unavailable. But what if they're simply aware? Aware of what lies ahead, aware of the battles you'd have to fight every day just to make something almost work. Aware that the constant uphill push could eventually crush the very tenderness you're trying to preserve. Some lovers do lie, dressing up fear in the clothes of nobility. But others, truer ones, make sacrifices that will never be sung about or filmed. They choose not to waste time, not to deepen damage, not to turn affection into a slow poison. They leave not because they don't care, but precisely because they do. When letting go becomes the braver act. If love is about wanting what's best for the other, then we must ask, can we still call it love when our presence is the source of slow erosion? If we bring storms instead of shelter, does our desire to stay really serve the one we claim to love, or just ourselves? It may be easy to romanticize staying through all odds. It may be harder, infinitely harder, to recognize when love means stepping back, to love fully, and then to love from afar. The weight of staying and the quiet grace of leaving. Let's imagine two people, bound not by convenience or fear of loneliness, but by that sharp, electric connection that feels once in a lifetime. Their conversations hum with depth. Their laughter clicks like puzzle pieces, finding home. And yet, beneath the magic, a quiet truth pulses. The very fabric of their realities doesn't align. Perhaps one of them has children, and the other a lifestyle stitched together by mobility and solitude. Perhaps one craves rootedness, while the other belongs to flight. Perhaps mental illness lives like a ghost between them, not always visible, but ever present, fragile mornings, spiraling evenings. Perhaps they simply come from different worlds, ones that do not translate without loss. The question becomes, how much pain is love allowed to cause before it stops being love and starts being something else? Emotional honesty versus emotional immersion. We often mistake emotional intensity for truth. The tears, the longing, the "I can't live without you" moments. They feel real, and they are. But feelings alone do not build bridges strong enough to carry real weight. They ignite, yes. They dazzle, but they do not sustain. It is one thing to feel deeply. It is another to discern wisely. And wise love, mature love, must sometimes admit that two souls can recognize each other, even adore each other, and yet still be wrong for the journey ahead. We're taught to fight, to choose love like a battlefield. But what if real love is more like tending a garden? Not every seed grows where we plant it. Some soil is too dry, some shade too deep. And sometimes, despite all our watering, the thing we hope to nourish withers slowly in our hands. When love becomes a mirror, there comes a moment, quiet, sometimes almost imperceptible, when you look into the eyes of the person you love and realize we are not helping each other grow anymore. That realization does not come in lightning. It's not a scream, it's a whisper. A realization that the sacrifices one of you is making will eventually breed resentment. That the compromises, while made in good faith, are carving away parts of each other that were never meant to be trimmed. And then the hardest question arises. If you truly care for someone, how much of yourself are you allowed to lose to keep them near? Or more painfully, how much of them are you willing to watch fade just so you don't have to say goodbye? The myth of the selfless stay. Popular culture elevates the one who stays, the one who fights for love. But staying, when misaligned, can become a slow betrayal. Not an act of loyalty, but a prolonged erosion of joy. What we rarely talk about is the dignity of departure, the kind of love that doesn't scream or beg, that doesn't punish or withdraw. That simply sees the incompatibility, the slow bleed, the shadow love casts when it tries too hard to stretch itself. Leaving, in this sense, is not running away. It's walking forward, with eyes open, with heartbreaking, but with the wisdom to know that love should not be a wound you carry. The invisible courage of letting go. Perhaps the greatest courage is not in chasing after love, but in recognizing when love, true, profound, life-altering love, is not enough to build a life together. Not every great love story ends in a shared home or entwined aging hands. Some great loves live only to awaken us, to change us, to show us who we could be, if only circumstances had aligned. And yet, even in their brevity, those loves leave marks that never fade. Not scars, but signatures. Not regrets, but quiet testaments to what it means to really love someone, to want their peace more than your comfort, their healing more than your happiness, their future, however far from yours, more than your desire to hold them close. The false heroism of holding on. We live in a culture that glamorizes endurance. We're told that the longer you stay, the deeper the love must be, that sacrifice is the currency of devotion, that giving up is always a symptom of cowardice, or worse, of never having loved at all. But what if staying, in certain circumstances, isn't noble? What if, sometimes, it's the easier thing to do? To remain wrapped in the familiar ache of a love that doesn't fit, but still feels intoxicating, can be its own form of emotional laziness. Walking away, on the other hand, demands clarity, strength, and above all, selflessness. True love doesn't cling where it causes damage. It recognizes when its presence has become more of a burden than a gift. Love, without conditions, not without discernment. We often misunderstand unconditional love. We think it means stay no matter what. But unconditional love is not the same as unboundaried love. It is entirely possible to care deeply for someone, to want their joy, their healing, their fulfillment, and still know that being in their life closely may not support that. There are people we can love completely and still be wrong for. Our timelines don't match. Our emotional tools are misaligned. Our very definitions of peace and connection may diverge. And in these cases, staying becomes less about devotion and more about attachment, about fear of loss, or fear of guilt, or fear of regret. But fear should never be the reason we hold on, especially not when holding on quietly poisons the well from which we both drink. The quiet exit that speaks louder than grand gestures. Imagine someone who leaves not with drama, not with cruelty, but with gentleness, who says, "I love you more than I know how to explain. And because I love you, I'm stepping back." Not because they've stopped caring, but because they've started seeing the larger picture. They understand that real love doesn't always end with two people walking into the sunset. Sometimes it ends with one person making space for the other to grow in peace, even if that growth happens far away. This kind of love doesn't make headlines. It won't be written about in sonnets or turned into tear-jerking ballads, but it is, perhaps, the most self-aware kind of love there is. The inner confession of the one who leaves. There's a strange kind of loneliness that haunts those who choose to walk away from someone they love. They don't get closure in the way we expect. There's no villain, no betrayal, no slam of a door, only quiet breakfast missed, only birthdays remembered in silence, only the ache of wanting to reach out and choosing not to, because to reach out would reopen what needed to be closed, would invite hope into a house that was never structurally sound to begin with. But inside, they carry a secret. They didn't leave because they didn't love enough. They left because they finally understood that love by itself is not always enough. To love and to release. At the heart of it all lies a paradox, that love, the force we associate with union and closeness, can sometimes call us to do the opposite, to step back, to surrender, to let go. But this is not failure, it's not weakness. It's the deepest form of emotional integrity, to say, I see you, I cherish you, and I will not ask you to bend into a shape that breaks you, just so I can feel less alone. That too is love, and it is the kind of love that leaves no bruises, only quiet gratitude, only peace, the wisdom of letting go. In the stories we grow up with, fairy tales, love songs, sweeping dramas, love is a finish line, something you chase, endure trials for, and finally win. And once you win it, you hold on, tight, forever. But life is less a scripted romance and more a shifting tide. Sometimes, loving someone means standing at the shoreline with open hands, watching the ship sail away. Not because the love died, but because it could not anchor there without damage. This kind of love rarely gets told. It doesn't fit in neat arcs or happy endings. It has no grand finale, no applause. It is quiet, sacred, almost invisible. But it is real. To love with open palms, not clenched fists. We're taught to believe that if someone leaves us, they never really loved us. That if we leave someone, we were selfish, or afraid, or cruel. But what if the deepest compassion sometimes means knowing that your presence, however well-meaning, limits the other person's peace? Imagine two people whose paths once aligned perfectly. Laughter flowed easily, eyes found each other in every room, but slowly, over time, the ground beneath them began to shift. Values no longer aligned, needs clashed, the rhythm broke, and yet, affection remained. In that space, it becomes a question not of feeling, but of function. Not, do I love you? But is my love helping you flourish? Or is it holding you hostage to a dream that no longer fits our reality? The love that walks away without bitterness. This is the love that does not fight for possession, but for clarity. It's the love that says, I refuse to drag you through a life that requires constant sacrifice, just to be near me. It's not self-pity or martyrdom. It's not playing the hero. It's not performing goodness. It is the raw, unglamorous awareness that staying would cost both of us more than we can afford. Not in money, but in vitality, serenity, self-worth. This love doesn't announce itself loudly. It departs with grace. It leaves room for healing. And most of all, it doesn't rewrite the past to justify the ending. It allows both people to honor what was, even as they release what cannot continue. The final gift of mature love. Perhaps the greatest myth we've inherited is that all love must end in together. But mature love is not defined by its outcome. It's defined by its impact, by how it shapes you, by what it teaches you about your capacity for empathy, patience, and truth. Sometimes the most enduring love leaves no photos on the wall, no anniversaries, no intertwined lives. What it leaves instead is a clean break, a respectful farewell, a chapter that doesn't close in bitterness, but in quiet respect. This kind of love doesn't die. It transforms. It becomes the gentle voice in your head that says, they mattered, and I was better for knowing them. It becomes the lesson you carry into your next story, not as baggage, but as depth. Closing. Reflection. Love isn't always holding on. Sometimes it's knowing when to let go. In the end, we must ask, is it more loving to cling to a fantasy or to face the truth with open eyes? To stay where we create chaos or to step aside with grace? Real love, the kind that asks for nothing in return, is not afraid of its own ending. It knows that release too can be a form of care, that stepping away can be as sacred as staying close. Because to truly love someone is not just to desire them or to be desired. It is to want what is best for their life, even if that life no longer includes you. And that, quietly, with dignity, is love's final and most honest